Assalamu alaikum. This is the very first episode of Amongst the Few. Today we're talking about change and the obstacles on the path to change. I'm your host Kamal El Mekki and you're watching ATF channel. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulihil Ameen. Amma ba'd. Everybody wants to change and everybody wants to improve. One of the Muslim scholars said that every human being and every animal, everything that they do is either directly or indirectly related to gaining some type of good now or in the future, or pushing away some type of harm now or in the future. And if you think about it to yourself, any animal and any human being, anything that they do, you'll think about it and you'll find that it is actually to get some type of good or to push away some potential harm in the future. No matter what it is, if you think about it, you'll find that to be true. Now psychologists, they say the same thing. They say that human beings are motivated by incentive, meaning the person will ask themselves, what's in it for me? What benefit do I get out of it? And that's why you find sometimes if a person is doing something that at that moment doesn't seem very fun or very enjoyable. Sometimes someone might be sitting and studying for 6 hours straight. Why are they doing that? Because in the future there's going to be some kind of benefit, some kind of degree, some kind of reward. Sometimes someone will do something out of wanting reward in the next life, or will prevent himself from doing something because of a harm now or in the next life. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He will motivate us to do something by telling us the benefit that we'll get right now. For example, zakah. You pay your zakah, it purifies your wealth and there's barakah in your wealth. That's an immediate benefit. Sometimes the benefit comes in the next life. Sometimes Allah Azza wa Jalla will tell us the harm of doing something now, or the harm of leaving something, or the punishment for leaving it in the next life. And sometimes Allah Azza wa Jalla will tell us stories of the prophets before or of the nations before. So we can see the benefit and the harm, and we can either do or avoid what they did. So even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using that because He knows we're motivated by these incentives. So the question is then, why is it that sometimes people still don't change? People generally welcome any change that has to do with personal development, acquiring a new skill or improving your character or developing in any way. But sometimes you'll know someone who is a smoker. He wants to quit. He knows that quitting is good. He knows that that's a good change, but he still can't do it. So why is it that sometimes people can't change? Because there are obstacles. The first obstacle is that a lot of times people don't know what it is they need to change. And that's why they say, knowing what to change is the beginning of wisdom. So for example, someone might be unhappy and he says, well, the first thing I need to do, I need to move from this city, or I need to change my religion. And here he might be changing something that has nothing to do with his unhappiness. He's moving from the entire city, but it's not the exact reason behind his unhappiness. A lot of times you go to in counselors and they'll tell you things like, well, you need to leave religion for now, even though that has nothing to do with the source of unhappiness. So that means the first step of wisdom is that you find out what is the source, or know what it is that's causing the problem, or what it is that you need to change specifically. The second step is to find out what your resources are. So let's take an example. Suppose somebody wants to lose weight, all right? First thing, they need to find out what the problem is, all right? They identify the problem. Suppose it's the kind of food that they're eating, or the amount of food, or the frequency of meals. Second, they look at the resources that are available to them, all right? So perhaps they have health insurance, they can go get their blood and their cholesterol checked out, they can talk to a nutritionist or someone talk to them about diet, they can look at all the available diets that are there, and perhaps they can go to a gym. So all these are available resources. So first, find out what the problem is, or find out what you need to change, and two, find out what are the available resources. But again, sometimes people will have the resources and they'll know what the problem is and they still can't change. So why is that? But here's something interesting though. The more resources you have, the more guilt you will feel for not making the necessary change. So let's take an example. Somebody wants to continue their education, all right? And they have a lot of money, they have a lot of time, and they don't have any hobby or anything that takes up their time, but they still don't go to college and finish their education. That person will feel a lot more guilty than someone who doesn't have time, doesn't have money, has to work 2 or 3 jobs to take care of his family. That person will feel less guilty than the one who has a lot of resources. Let's take another example. Somebody who lives right above or right next to the musalla or the masjid, and yet he still doesn't go to the salah. He will feel a lot more guilty than the guy who lives across town and doesn't have a car. That guy has less resources. This one has more, and so he feels more guilty. So if anybody ever asks you why is change important, because the more resources you have, the greater guilt. So it can even lead to your unhappiness. So change now and making the changes you want in your life are linked to your happiness as well. But there's one more thing though, and that is that the bigger the distance you have, or the greater the distance between where you are and what your potential is, the more room you have for misery. So for example, you are right here, and your potential is that you could be right here. So the more room you have between where you are and your potential, the more room you have for misery in your life. Okay, so suppose you've identified what needs to be changed, and you've also listed all the resources that you have available to you. Is there anything else to stop you from changing? Absolutely. Shackles. And there are actually two types of shackles. Those that are imposed upon you by other people and the environment, and those that are self-imposed. So these are the two types of other obstacles that stop you from changing. Other people, society, culture, laws, or shackles from within, such as laziness, procrastination, severe guilt. All these things are self-imposed shackles. The most amazing thing is that Allah Azza wa Jal mentions both these types of shackles in verse 157 in Surah Al-A'raf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الذين يتبعون الرسول النبي الأمي الذي يجدونه مكتوبا عندهم في التوراة والإنجيل يأمرهم بالمعروف وينهاهم عن المنكر ويحل لهم الطيبات ويحرم عليهم الخبائث ويضع عنهم إصرهم والأغلال التي كانت عليهم. إلى آخر الآية. What we want from this verse. So the verse is describing the Prophet ﷺ, saying that those who follow the Prophet, the Messenger, and the Prophet who is unlettered, meaning illiterate, that they find written and mentioned in the Torah and in the Injil, the Gospels. يَأْمُرُهُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. He commands them to do that which is good, and He forbids them from that which is evil. And then He makes haram for them the evil things, and He makes halal for them the good things. And then this is the part we want from the verse. وَيَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِصْرَهُمْ. And He removes of them their heavy burdens. And Al-Fayruz Abadi here talks about إِصْرَهُمْ here. These burdens are the things that hold you back and keep you from moving forward. So these then are self-imposed. وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. Aghlal is the plural of ghul or ghullun, which is like a collar or a fetter or a yoke or a chain. And usually nobody chains, puts a collar around their own neck. Other people put the collar around your neck. So the verse, amazingly, is speaking about both of the shackles that we want to talk about, the external and the ones that are self-imposed, the internal ones. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week's episode, but inshallah this is going to be a weekly show. So what you're going to do is you need to subscribe, and then you'll get every episode in your inbox. And also, put your comments down there. Tell us what topics you would like to hear about, specifically those related to improving and changing, self-improvement. So when I say us and tell us, what does that mean? There's another host, Muhammad Hassan, is going to be hosting ATF channel as well. And his show is next week. So we're going to be alternating weeks. So make sure you subscribe, make sure you comment, and make sure you tune in. Sallallahu wa barak ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.